the architect of the phantom map. Have you ever stood in the heart of a great city and felt an overwhelming sense of grief? A feeling that you are walking through a graveyard, not a graveyard of people, but of possibilities, of futures that were conceived, that fought for life, and were then strangled in their cribs by greed and indifference. Every congested highway was once meant to be a river. Every soulless concrete tower was meant to be a garden reaching for the sun. My name is Carlos Mendoza. My work has taken me into the darkest corners of human history, and I have learned that the most terrifying ghosts are not the spirits of the dead. They are the ghosts of ideas. Potent, brilliant, beautiful ideas that were murdered and buried, but they don't rest in peace. They wait. They fester in the dark, gathering strength, waiting for someone to stumble upon their tomb. This is the story of 3 explorers who went looking for a forgotten piece of city infrastructure. What they found was a ghost. But this ghost didn't want to drag them to hell. It wanted to give them a key. The story they brought back to me, pieced together from 47 hours of recovered footage and their own traumatized testimony, is the most profound and terrifying account of a haunting I have ever encountered. This is the tale of Estação Silêncio and the architect who refused to be forgotten. Chapter 1. The Digital Black Hole. It began where all modern myths are born, in the digital ether. A whisper among the most elite urban explorers in South America. They called it Silent Station. A phantom, a ghost station on São Paulo's Blue Line, supposedly built in the early 1970s and then sealed, erased, completely expunged from existence. There were no official records. Ask a city planner, and they'd laugh in your face. Search the historical archives, and you'd find a literal gap, a missing set of pages. It was a digital and historical black hole, an information vacuum, and for an explorer named Leo, it was his white whale. The footage he later gave me shows him in his apartment, and his eyes held the feverish glint of an obsessive. To him, the city's underbelly was a library of lost stories, and Estação Silêncio was the forbidden text. He wasn't alone. There was David, a tech savant, a man who believed in the absolute truth of data. His cameras, scanners, and audio gear weren't for taking pictures. They were for capturing evidence of reality itself. And then there was Maya. She was an architecture student, but that was just a label. In our interviews, she described her ability as a kind of structural empathy. She could touch a decaying wall and feel the echo of the lives lived within it. A dangerous gift. For 2 years, they hunted this ghost. They cross-referenced, rumored, construction sites with geological surveys, looking for inconsistencies. Then, David, sifting through a corrupted city planning file from 1973, found it. Not a station, but an anomaly. A power grid schematic that showed a massive unexplained energy drain leading to a location that, on every modern map, simply did not exist. It was behind a demolished factory, in a forgotten industrial sector. That was all they needed. They were going to pry open a forgotten footnote in the city's history. They had no idea they were about to tear a hole in reality itself. Chapter 2. The Taste of Sealed Time. Asterisk. The footage from their descent is difficult to watch. It's a 30-meter drop into absolute, primordial darkness. The air that rushes out to meet them doesn't just smell stale, it smells sterile. It's the scent of time itself, sealed in a jar for 50 years. When their boots finally touch down, the sound is all wrong. It's a dull, lifeless thud, absorbed instantly by a silence so profound, so total, that it feels like a physical presence. You have to understand, true silence doesn't exist in a city like São Paulo. There is always a hum, a thrum, the vibration of millions of lives moving just beyond your perception. But this, David's audio equipment, the most sensitive gear you can buy, registered 0, a perfect acoustic void. On the footage, I can see him tapping his headset, his face pale in the glow of his headlamp, his expression screaming a single question: how is this possible? They sweep their lights across the platform, and the paradox deepens. It's perfect, immaculate, untouched by graffiti, by decay, by the passage of 50 years. Advertisements for long-dead brands hang pristine on the walls. A clock is stopped at 3:15. The entire station is covered in a uniform, half-inch blanket of fine gray dust. It's a pharaoh's tomb, disguised as a metro station. But this perfection is what makes it so terrifying. It doesn't feel abandoned. It feels expectant, as if it's been patiently waiting, holding its breath for them to arrive. Chapter 3: The Cold Equation. It's David, the man of science, who discovers the first wound in the laws of physics. His tablet shows a thermal image of the far wall. On it, a perfect rectangle glows with a cold that defies explanation. The wall should be 20 degrees Celsius. This spot is 5. It's not a cold spot. It's an energy sink. It's actively pulling heat out of the universe. It's a signature that shouldn't exist. Leo, brave or foolish, I'm still not sure, approaches it. I can see in the footage how his breath begins to plume in front of him as he gets closer. He reaches out a hand and touches the wall. It's smooth, seamless, solid concrete, but Maya, she stays back. In her interview, she told me that the silence they were all feeling wasn't an absence of sound. It was an active broadcast, and it was coming from that wall. But underneath that crushing silence, she could perceive something else. A whisper of intent, she told me, her voice still shaking months later. I could hear a thought that wasn't mine. It was the idea of a pencil moving on paper, fast, precise, obsessive. Leo ignores her warning, driven by the need to solve the puzzle. He finds a hairline, seam, a detail no one would ever notice. He and David jam a crowbar in and push. The sound that follows is a deep, groaning sigh of stone grinding against stone. A sound of protest from a place that did not want to be opened. A section of the wall pivots inward, revealing an opening into a darkness so complete, it seems to absorb the beams of their headlamps. From within, a wave of even more intense cold washes over them, carrying the scent of old paper, ozone, and something else. Loneliness. It smelled like loneliness. Chapter 4: The Shroud of Forgetting. They stepped through the threshold, out of an abandoned station and into a secret history. They found themselves in an architect's private sanctuary, a room that existed on no blueprint. Filing cabinets stood, like steel soldiers against one wall. A calendar was turned to August, 1974. But their attention, their entire beings, were pulled to the object in the center of the room, a massive drafting table, large enough to hold the dreams of a giant. It was covered by a heavy, stained canvas sheet, a shroud hiding its secrets. The footage here is tense. The team moves as if in a dream, their lights converging on that central altar. You can feel their heartbeats in the shaky camera work. Leo, the leader, approaches it alone. He reaches out a trembling hand. This is the moment. The culmination of his years-long obsession. He grips the rough edge of the canvas. He takes one last, deep breath of that 50-year-old air, and he pulls. The canvas slides off with a soft, final whisper. And what it reveals stops their hearts. It's not just a blueprint. It's not just a map. It's an entire, breathtakingly intricate model of a city, a miniature metropolis crafted with obsessive, divine detail, covering every inch of the massive table. It is São Paulo, but a São Paulo born from a better world, a better dream. And as their lights trace the impossible beauty of its its shimmering canals, its spiraling green towers, its vast, open parks, a single, terrifying realization dawns on them all at once. The entire room, every surface, is coated in a thick, uniform layer of gray dust. The floor, the cabinets, the calendar, even the canvas sheet Leo now holds in his hand. But the model city is perfectly, impossibly, supernaturally clean. Not a single speck of dust mars its surface. In a tomb sealed for half a century, its centerpiece has been polished, cared for, maintained. It hasn't been waiting. It has been tended. The awe curdles into pure, ice-cold terror. This isn't a museum, it's a shrine, and its curator is still here. Chapter 5. The Curator. Asterisk. There is a moment in every investigation I undertake, a point of no return, where the laws of our world peel back to reveal the horrifying mechanics ticking just underneath. For them, this was that moment. The pristine model city was not a miracle of preservation. It was a statement, a declaration. I am still here. This is my domain. David, the pragmatist, did what a man of science does. When his reality collapses, he tried to document it. He raised his camera, his breath catching in his throat. He needed proof. He needed a photograph to anchor his sanity. He muttered something. I can just barely make it out on the audio track. Something like, "Okay, you son of a bitch. Let's see. You?" He was trying to provoke it. A catastrophically bad idea. He aimed the camera at the magnificent, dustless model. The footage I'm showing you now is taken directly from his camera's memory card. Watch closely. The scream that follows on the audio track is pure, animal terror. David drops the camera, scrambling backward, his panicked shouts echoing in the dead air. It's there. It's right there. I saw him. Leo and Maya spin around, their lights slashing wildly through the darkness, finding nothing but empty space and dancing dust motes. The ghost was gone, but it had made its point. It can be seen when it chooses to be seen. The next few minutes of the footage are chaos. But then, a terrifying new discipline takes hold. Leo, realizing the magnitude of what they've encountered, issues an order. The camera. David, get the camera. We have to see the picture. David, now pale and trembling, crawls toward the camera. He picks it up, his fingers fumbling with the controls. He navigates to the image gallery. He finds the photos of the station, the clock, the entrance, and then, nothing. The file number of the ghost photo is missing. There is only a blank space and a single chilling message on the screen. File not found. That's when they understood. This was not a passive echo. It was an active intelligence with frightening power. It could manifest. It could be photographed, and then it could reach into their technology and erase the evidence of its own existence. They were in a cage with a ghost who could edit their reality. The panic subsides, replaced by a cold, watchful dread, and in that heavy silence, the curator decides to continue the tour. On the edge of the massive drafting table, a tightly rolled blueprint, which had been sitting motionless, begins to slide across the dusty surface. It moves with a smooth, unnatural grace, navigating around drafting tools and other scrolls, leaving a clean, thin line in the dust. It stops directly in front of Maya, an offering. Slowly, deliberately, the scroll unfurls itself. The sound is unnervously loud in the quiet room, a crisp, papery sigh that seems to go on forever. It reveals a breathtakingly detailed plan, not of a building, but of an entire ecosystem. Elegant script at the top reads, Pulmo, Verdiate Green Lung. It was a plan to re-engineer the city's atmosphere. A network of carbon-capturing parks and architectural innovations so advanced, so brilliant, it would have saved the city from the very pollution that chokes it today. It was a message, a plea. This is what they took from you, as they stare at the impossible genius laid out before them. Two things happen at once. First, the temperature in the room plummets. It becomes so cold, their breath explodes from their mouths in thick white clouds. The second thing is even more impossible. From deep within the miniature city model, a light flickers on, a tiny, warm, golden pinprick of light, glowing from a window on the top floor of a single, central building. It glows with a steady, welcoming luminescence. It's a beacon, a destination, and as their eyes are fixed, hypnotized by that impossible light, a new sound slices through the air behind them. A sharp, loud, metallic click. They spin around. The room is the same. The rusted filing cabinets are the same. But one thing has changed. A single drawer, on the third cabinet from the left, has just slid open by 2 inches. It's another offering. The next exhibit. The ghost of the architect isn't just showing them his work. He's telling them his story, and he's inviting them to turn the page. Chapter 6. The Ghost's Ledger. There's a saying among deep-sea divers, a man who fears the abyss will never find the pearls. In that moment, Leo, Maya, and David stood at the edge of a chasm in reality. David wanted to run. He was a man of data, and his data was screaming that every law of physics had been systematically violated. His survival instinct was telling him to get to the surface, to breathe unfiltered air, and to forget everything he had seen. But Leo was an explorer. The abyss didn't scare him. It sang to him. And Maya, she felt the tragedy. She understood this wasn't an attack. It was a desperate act of communication. On the footage, I see Leo turn to the others. He doesn't say a word. He just gives them a look that says, "We came this far. There is no turning back now." He turns and begins to walk toward the beckoning filing cabinet. Each footstep is a conscious decision, a step deeper into the ghost's narrative. The audio picks up David's frantic whisper, "Leo, don't, man, just leave it." But it's too late. Leo has accepted the invitation. He reaches the cabinet. The cold coming off the metal is palpable, even on the video. He crouches down and peers into the drawer. It's not filled with files. It's not filled with blueprints. It holds a single, solitary object, resting on a bed of brittle, yellowed stationery, a journal. It's bound in rich, dark leather, so perfectly preserved it looks as though it was placed there yesterday. On the cover, embossed in simple, elegant gold leaf that seems to absorb the light, are 2 initials, JCTHIs, is the moment, the story, pivots. Leo reaches into the drawer. The footage shows a visible jolt pass through his body the instant his fingers make contact with the leather. He told me later it wasn't a physical shock, but a mental one. A flash of raw, unfiltered emotion that wasn't his own, a surge of soaring creative pride, followed immediately by a crushing, soul-deep wave of absolute loneliness. He reels back for a second, then his resolve hardens. He lifts the journal out. It's heavy, impossibly heavy, as if filled not with paper, but with condensed time. He carries it back to the others, holding it not like an object, but like a heart that was still beating. He sits on the edge of the station platform, his legs dangling into the blackness of the track pit. The others huddle close, their headlamps creating a single, fragile bubble of light in the vast, dead station. Leo opens the book. The pages are filled with the most beautiful, precise handwriting I have ever seen. It's the hand of a master architect, a poet of lines and angles. He begins to read aloud, and his voice, echoing in that impossible silence, becomes the voice of the ghost himself. September 4th, 1972. Leo reads, his voice hushed with reverence. "They have granted me the city as my canvas. They believe they are funding a project. They do not understand. We are not building structures. We are building lungs for a city that has forgotten how to breathe. We will give its people back the sun and the sky." The words hang in the cold air, and the feeling in the room changes. The aggressive cold softens, transforming into something watchful, attentive, almost grateful. The ghost of Julian Coria is listening. For the first time in 50 years, someone is hearing his testimony. For an hour, they are lost in his vision. The journal is a masterpiece, a fusion of art and science that could have saved São Paulo from itself. It details not just the how of his city, but the profound, human why. But then, the tone shifts. The confident cursive becomes tighter, more agitated. Leo's voice drops as he reads the entry that changes everything. March 11th, 1974. A man named Alves visited my office today. A city councilor. He moved through my designs, not with the eyes of a visionary, but with the eyes of a butcher assessing a carcass. He spoke of necessary efficiencies and stakeholder interests. He was not speaking of building a city. He was speaking of gutting it for parts. I saw in his eyes a deep, profound hunger for mediocrity. He is a termite at the foundations of a cathedral. There it is, the story's villain. The name of the man who broke Julian Correa's dream. Leo looks up from the journal, his own face now a reflection of the tragedy he holds in his hands. He snaps the book shut, a fatal mistake. The sound of the leather closing, though soft, is a deafening insult in the quiet station. The instant it happens, two things occur. In the hidden office, the small golden light in the miniature city model blinks out, plunging the room into absolute darkness. And the watchful, attentive presence vanishes, replaced by a surge of raw, wounded fury. The cold returns with the force of a physical blow. From the direction of the hidden office comes a sound, a low, grinding moan of stone and metal, the sound of a wound being torn open. And then, with a boom that shakes the very dust from the air, the massive, pivoting section of wall slams shut. The sound is final, absolute, the sound of a tomb being sealed forever. Their path to the journal, to the model, to the heart of the mystery, is gone. They are trapped. They spin around, their lights frantically searching for the ladder, for their only path to the surface. But their escape is no longer an option. Standing at the base of the ladder is Julian Correa. But this is not the gentle curator or the tragic poet. This is a warden, a specter of pure, incandescent rage. His form flickers violently, his features twisted in a mask of betrayal. They have broken the contract. They have silenced his voice once more. And now, he will show them what true silence really is. They are sealed in the dark, 30 meters beneath the city, with the ghost of a man whose dream they have just desecrated. And he is not going to let them leave. Chapter 7. The Architecture of Fear. Let me try to explain what it means to be hunted by a ghost. It is not the fear of violence. It is not the fear of death. It is the fear of having reality itself turn against you. The entity that stood before them, blocking their only escape, was a weaponized form of grief. Its rage was so potent, so absolute, it was literally rewriting the laws of physics in that station to hold them captive. The footage from these next few minutes is harrowing. They are trapped. The way back to the architect's office is sealed by a ton of solid stone. The way to the surface is blocked by a shimmering, solidifying specter of pure rage. They are rats in a cage of the ghost's own design. Leo, to his credit, tries to take control. I can hear him on the audio track, shouting, "Orders, David. Your gear, is anything working? Audio, radio. Can we signal for help?" David, sobbing, scrambles for his equipment bag. He pulls out his high-powered radio transceiver. It's dead. Not out of power, the screen is on, but it's frozen on a boot-up logo. He tries his phone. No signal, of course. But worse than that, the screen itself is glitching, the icons dissolving into static, as if the very code is being unwritten. The ghost isn't just blocking their signals. It's dissolving their technology. It's isolating them, cutting them off from the 21st century, plunging them into the analog horror of its own time. But it's Maya who understands the true nature of the attack. It's not about technology. It's about psychology. She screams, "It's the station. Listen." And that's when the true horror begins. The station itself starts to turn on them. The advertisements on the walls, those perfect time capsules from 1974, begin to melt and reform. The smiling woman in a soda ad now has eyes that are black, empty pits. The ad copy warps, the letters rearranging themselves into accusing phrases. One poster now reads, "You cannot leave." Another, "You broke the promise." A cigarette ad, featuring a handsome, confident man, now shows his face as a skull, with a single word beneath it, Alves, the name of the politician from the journal. This is the ghost's power. Julian Coria was an architect. He designed spaces to evoke feelings of hope, light, and connection. Now, in his rage, he is using his genius for the opposite effect. He is redesigning the station in real time to be a perfectly engineered chamber of psychological torture. Then, the sound changes. The oppressive silence is broken. From the speakers embedded in the station ceiling, speakers that have been dormant for 50 years, a sound crackles to life. It's not music. It's not a voice. It's the sound of a pencil. A frantic, furious scratching sound, amplified 1,000 times, echoing throughout the station. It's the sound of an artist's genius curdling into pure, obsessive madness. It's the sound of Julian's mind breaking, played on a loop for them to experience. The scratching sound grates on their nerves, burrowing into their skulls. David clutches his head, screaming for it to stop, but the ghost is just getting started. It knows their fears. It has been inside their minds. It begins to project illusions, tailored specifically for each of them. The ghost is dismantling them, piece by piece, using their own deepest anxieties as the raw material. David, the man of data, sees reality dissolve into digital noise. Maya, the empath, feels the station suffocating around her, sharing its agony. And Leo, the obsessive explorer, sees his goal, the exit, become an impossible, unreachable dream. They are losing. The assault is too precise, too personal. They are on the verge of breaking completely. But Leo, in a moment of desperate clarity, remembers the one thing that seemed to connect with the ghost on a peaceful level. The one thing that wasn't about fear or failure. The journal. He still clutches it in his hand. He scrambles over to his backpack and finds his headlamp, shining its beam onto the page. He has to try something. He has to change the narrative. He ignores the scratching sound, the warping walls, the phantom at the ladder. He opens the journal to a random page and begins to read aloud, his voice shaking, shouting to be heard over the cacophony of madness. He reads a passage not about betrayal or politics, but about the pure joy of creation. Leo shouting, October 1st, 1973. Today, we solved the equation for the Grand Atrium's skylight, a perfect ellipse, angled to capture the winter sun at exactly the right inclination to illuminate the main concourse for 4 hours each day. It will be a cathedral of light, a place for the public, for the people, not for profit, a place of simple, honest beauty. It's working. The words, Julian's own words of passion and hope, are like a counterfrequency to his rage. They are a reminder of the man he was, not the monster he has become. The ghost's fury is momentarily confused, its concentration broken. The psychological assault lessens. Leo sees his chance. The journal. He screams at the others. It's the only thing that affects him. Read it. Read his words. Remind him of his dream. He rips a handful of pages from the journal, an act of desecration, but a necessary one, and shoves them into Maya's and David's hands. Read, aloud. Now, they have found a weapon. A fragile, desperate weapon made of paper and ink. They are about to attempt the world's first literary exorcism. Shouting the words of a dead man's dream into the face of his own nightmare. But the question remains, is there enough hope left in those pages to overcome 50 years of distilled rage? Or will they only make the ghost even angrier for reminding him of everything he lost? Chapter 8. The Cacophony of Creation. What followed was the most bizarre and terrifying exorcism I have ever heard of. It wasn't a battle of faith against evil, of holy water against damnation. It was a battle of memory against rage, a desperate attempt to drown a ghost in the sound of its own forgotten hope. They stood back to back, a tiny island of defiance in an ocean of spectral fury, and they shouted Julian Correa's dream back into the face of his nightmare. A public library where any child can read, a space designed for quiet contemplation, with acoustics that dampen the city's roar to a whisper. Knowledge must be a sanctuary, free to all. The canals will use a filtration system powered by the water's own current. Clean water, not as a commodity, but as a right. We will give the river back to the people. It was a cacophony. 3 desperate voices, shouting different fragments of a utopian dream, all at once. They were overloading the ghost's consciousness, forcing it to remember its life's work. The station became a war zone between 2 powerful forces. The accusatory messages on the walls flickered, the words you cannot leave momentarily replaced by phrases from the blueprints. Like structural harmony and public access corridor, the ghost was losing its grip. Its rage, a single, focused point of energy for 50 years, was being splintered by the memory of its own multifaceted genius. The entity at the ladder was no longer a terrifying warden. It was beginning to look like what it truly was, a tormented, heartbroken man. Its form flickered between the furious specter and the stooped, sad figure they had first seen in the camera's flash. Leo saw the change. He saw the ghost's agony, and he realized that shouting random passages wasn't enough. They weren't just fighting the ghost. They needed to reach it. They needed to find the source of the wound. He frantically scanned the pages in his hand, looking for the name that had appeared on the wall, the name of the man who had started it all. He found the entry. Alves, it wasn't your fault. Listen to me. Julian, it wasn't your fault. Leo had found the nerve. He had spoken the name of the demon. He continued, his voice no longer shouting, but speaking with a powerful, urgent empathy. He called your vision a fantasy. He read, his voice resonating with a sudden, profound understanding. He says the city needs more roads, not parks. More concrete, not life. He is going to kill my city. He killed it, Julian, not you. Your dream wasn't a failure. It was murdered. We see it. We see the beauty of it. We see the truth. As Leo spoke these words, a fundamental shift occurred. The ghost of Julian Correa took a step back from the ladder. The rage in its form dissolved, replaced by a wave of sorrow so immense, so palpable, that it seemed to suck all the energy from the room. The figure began to lose its coherence, its form wavering like a heat haze. A low, soft sound emanated from it, not a moan of anger, but a sigh of unbearable, century-long grief being released. And then, Maya saw something the others didn't. Her gift, her structural empathy, allowed her to see past the ghost of the man and perceive the ghost of the place. The office. It's back. The ghost was lowering its defenses. It was showing them the memory of its final days, the moment of its deepest despair. The ghost of the man was fading, and in its place, it was showing them its heart. The sealed room was no longer a tomb. It was a scar, and it was inviting them to witness the moment the wound was made. The apparition at the ladder dissipated completely, like smoke in the wind. The path to the surface was now clear. They could run. They could escape with their lives, and a story that would change the world. But Leo, Maya, and David didn't look at the ladder. They stood, frozen, staring at the shimmering, translucent wall and the heartbreaking memories playing out within. The ghost had given them a choice. Flee with what they knew, or stay and witness the final, terrible truth of what happened to Julian Correa in that room. It was the difference between telling a story and understanding it. And in that moment, they knew there was no real choice at all. They had to see it through to the end. Chapter 9. The Final Blueprint. *, the rage was gone. All that was left was the wound. The ghost of Julian Coria had spent 50 years building a fortress of anger around its own heartbreak, and with a few desperate words from his own journal, these three explorers had managed to tear it down. What they were being shown now was not a threat. It was a confession. An invitation to witness the final moments of a great man's life. The path to the surface was clear. The specter was gone. Every rational instinct should have sent them scrambling up that ladder into the safety of the world above. But they didn't run. How could they? They were no longer just explorers. They had become participants in this tragedy. To leave now would be the ultimate act of betrayal, no different from the one committed by Counselor Alves 50 years ago. They had to see it through. Slowly, as if approaching a sacred site, they walked toward the shimmering wall. The footage shows them reaching out, their hands hesitating before touching the surface. There was no physical barrier. Their hands passed through the ghostly image of the wall, as if through smoke, into the memory of the room beyond. They stepped inside. They were standing inside a memory. A hallowed, tragic space, where time had folded in on itself. The air hummed with the echoes of Julian's final, desperate hours. They could feel his soaring ambition, his crushing disappointment, his unbearable loneliness. It was all there, layered in the very atoms of the room. But the ghosts wanted them to see one final thing. In the center of the room, standing beside the real drafting table, was the ghost of Julian Coria himself. He wasn't the furious warden or the tormented specter. He was just a man, translucent and sorrowful, his form now calm and stable. He wasn't looking at them. His entire attention was focused on the table before him. He was holding a single sheet of paper. As the explorers watched, frozen in awe and sorrow, the ghost slowly, reverently, laid the single sheet of paper down on top of his magnificent model of Policia Nova. Then, his form dissolved, not with a violent flicker, but with a gentle, final sigh, like a candle flame being softly blown out. He was gone. The memory loop was broken. The piano music from the speakers faded into silence. The station was once again quiet. The office was just an office. The model was just a model. But on top of that dustless, perfect city, there was now a new object. A single, real, physical sheet of paper that hadn't been there moments before. Leo, his heart pounding, reached for it. He lifted the paper. It was not a confession. It was not a suicide note. It was a final blueprint. But it was not for a city. Rendered in Julian's flawless, heartbreakingly precise style, it was a detailed anatomical drawing of a human heart. And across this drawing, woven between the arteries and ventricles, was a complex, elegant diagram. It showed how every major innovation of his Policia Nova, the clean water canals, the pollution-scrubbing parks, the public spaces designed for community, was meant to directly alleviate the specific stresses and ailments that plagued the modern citizen. It was a diagnostic chart. It showed how traffic congestion constricts the arteries, how lack of public space leads to social atrophy, how air pollution poisons the blood, and at the bottom of the page, in his beautiful, steady cursive, was a single, devastating sentence. "They called my city a fantasy," Leo read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. "But the sickness of theirs is real. When they buried my dream, they were only entombing their own cure." This was never about architecture. It was about saving lives. This was his final testament, the missing piece. His ghost hadn't been haunting a station. It had been guarding a cure for a civilization that was dying and didn't even know it. The haunting was not an act of rage. It was a 50-year-long attempt to deliver a message. And now, the message had been delivered. The journal, the model, and this final, heartbreaking blueprint. The full story was in their hands. The weight of it was immense. As they stood there in the silence, processing the enormity of their discovery, a low, grinding sound echoed from the far wall. The tomb was unsealing itself. The ghost of Julian Coria had given them everything he had. His story, his genius, his heart. Now, he was letting them go. The question that hung in the air, heavier than the dust of 50 years, was no longer how they would escape. The question was, what on earth were they going to do with a dead man's cure for the world? Chapter 10. The Weight of the Cure. There is a silence that follows a storm, a quiet, so profound it feels louder than the chaos that preceded it. The haunting was over. The rage had dissipated. The grief had been witnessed. The ghost of Julian Coria had finally, after 50 years of solitary screaming, been heard. He had unsealed his own tomb, and was now offering them their release. The footage from this point is slow, dreamlike. The explorers move with a heavy, deliberate exhaustion. The frantic energy of survival is gone, replaced by the immense, crushing weight of what they now possess. They are no longer just explorers, or even survivors. They are messengers. They are the executors of a dead man's last will and testament. And the inheritance is not a treasure. It's a terrible, beautiful burden. They walk out of the architect's office for the last time. They don't look back. There's no need. The story is no longer in that room. It's in their hands. They cross the dusty platform, their footsteps the only sound in the cavernous space. They reach the base of the ladder, the same spot where, just an hour before, a terrifying specter had blocked their path. Now, there is nothing. Just a ladder leading up into the world of the living. Climbing that 30-meter ladder was, as Maya later told me, like ascending from the ancient past into the chaotic present. When they finally pushed open the heavy iron grate and crawled out into the grimy alleyway, the world assaulted their senses. The distant roar of traffic, the smell of street food and exhaust fumes, the humid embrace of the snow polo morning. It was the world they had left behind, but it was no longer the same, because now they knew it was sick, and they were holding the prescription for its cure. The next 48 hours of their lives are a blur of adrenaline, caffeine, and a dawning sense of dread, far more chilling than any ghost. They hole up in Leo's apartment, which now feels less like a home and more like a safe house. The artifacts are spread out on his dining room table. The journal, the blueprint of the heart, and David's laptop, which holds the terabytes of scans, photos, and audio recordings from the station. The evidence is overwhelming, it's undeniable, and it's utterly unbelievable. This is the new horror they face. A horror not of spectral rage, but of human indifference. What do you do with a story like this? Leo, using a burner phone, makes a few anonymous calls to architectural historians he trusts. They listen, intrigued, but the moment he mentions a hidden station and undiscovered plans, he is met with polite, condescending dismissal. It sounds like a fantasy, a conspiracy theory. David does a deep dive on the villain of the story, Councillor Alves. He is no longer a city councillor. He is now a celebrated elder statesman, a philanthropic giant with his name on hospitals and university wings. He is a living legend, shielded by decades of power, wealth, and public adoration. To accuse him of sabotaging a project 50 years ago based on a dead man's journal, it would be career suicide. They wouldn't just be ignored, they would be crushed. The system that erased Julian Coria in 1974 is still here. It's older, stronger, and has much more to lose. They realize, with a sinking feeling, that the ghost wasn't just trapped in the station. He was trapped by this world. His rage was not just at the loss of his dream, but at the infuriating, unchangeable reality that a beautiful idea is no match for a corrupt, powerful man. They are sitting in silence, the weight of their impossible situation pressing down on them when Maya speaks. Her voice is quiet, but it cuts through the despair. We're thinking about this the wrong way. Julian didn't haunt the station because he wanted revenge on Elvis. He haunted it because he wanted his work to be seen. He didn't want a conviction. He wanted a legacy. Narrator. And that's when the new plan begins to form. A plan born not from a desire to expose a villain, but from a need to honor a hero. If the world of politics and history won't listen, then they won't talk to them. They will bypass the gatekeepers entirely. They will not leak the story to the press, who will only sensationalize and discredit it. They will not take it to the authorities, who will only bury it. They will take Julian Correa's story, his vision, his cure, and they will give it directly to the people. They are about to attempt an exorcism not of a ghost, but of a corrupt history, and their weapon will not be a lawsuit or a news report. Their weapon will be the internet. They are going to build a new kind of monument, one made not of concrete and steel, but of concrete and code, and they will unleash a 50-year-old ghost into the modern world. Chapter 11. The digital resurrection and exorcism is the act of expelling a spirit from a person or a place. But what Leo, Maya, and David were about to attempt was something else entirely. Not an expulsion, but a resurrection. They understood. Now that Julian Correa's ghost wasn't a malevolent entity to be banished. It was a suppressed truth that needed to be liberated. And if the institutions of the world were designed to bury truths like his, then they would create a new institution, one with no walls, no gatekeepers, and a global reach. For the next month, they worked with a feverish, obsessive energy that mirrored the ghost's own. David, the tech savant, wasn't just building a website. He was building a digital museum, a virtual sanctuary. He coded it from the ground up to be uncensorable, hosted on decentralized servers, impossible to take down. It was a fortress of information. Maya, the architectural empath, took on the role of curator. She didn't just scan the blueprints, she brought them to life. She used the LiDAR data to create breathtaking interactive 3D models of Polyscia Nova. She created virtual walkthroughs where anyone could fly through the canals, stand in the grand atrium of the library, or look out from the top of the spiraling green towers. She made the dream tangible, and Leo, the storyteller, meticulously transcribed every word of Julian's journal, cross-referencing it with the architectural plans and the heartbreaking blueprint of the human heart. He wove it all together into a powerful, undeniable narrative. They were not presenting a ghost story. They were presenting the case file of a visionary, a lost chapter of human potential. They gave it a simple, powerful name, the Correa Project. They didn't release it with a bang. They released it with a whisper. They planted a seed, and then they waited. For the first 24 hours, nothing happened. The silence was deafening, a horrible echo of the station itself. They began to fear they had failed, that the world was simply too loud, too distracted to hear a 50-year-old whisper. And then, it started. A single student in Lisbon shared the link. An architecture professor in Tokyo retweeted it. A design blog in New York picked it up. Within 48 hours, it was a spark. Within 72, it was a fire. Within a week, it was a global inferno. The Correa Project went viral in a way that defied all marketing logic. It was shared not by influencers, but by academics, engineers, city planners, artists, and historians. People who recognized the staggering, impossible genius of the work. Julian Correa's name, once erased from history, was now being spoken in university lecture halls from Boston to Berlin. His designs were debated. His philosophy was studied. His tragedy was mourned. He was no longer a ghost. He was a legend. Of course, Counselor Alvis, now old and frail, released a statement from his army of lawyers, dismissing it all as a malicious, unsubstantiated fantasy. But it was too late. They hadn't accused him of a crime. They had simply shown the world Julian's light, and in doing so, they had exposed Alvis's shadow for all to see. His legacy was forever tarnished, not by a conviction, but by a simple, elegant comparison. They never went back to the station. There was no reason to. About 6 months after the Korea project went live, Maya was walking past the old industrial sector. She told me she stopped, and she listened. The hum of the city was all she could hear. The cold spot, the silence, the feeling of a waiting presence. It was gone. Julian Korea's work was finally out in the world. His message had been delivered, and his spirit, finally, was at peace. They didn't just exorcise a ghost, they liberated him. They proved that a story, a powerful and true story, can be the most effective form of justice. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories like his are out there, buried in locked rooms and redacted files? How many other ghosts are waiting, not for a priest or a paranormal investigator, but for a chronicler, for someone with the courage to simply listen, and then to tell the world what they heard? This has been the story of Estação Silêncio, the tale of 3 urban explorers who, in seeking a lost piece of their city's history, discovered the ghost of a visionary architect named Julian Korea. They found that he wasn't a spirit of vengeance, but a guardian of a powerful secret, the blueprints for a utopian city that was sabotaged by corruption 50 years ago. Trapped in his subterranean tomb, they faced his spectral rage, not with rituals, but with the words of his own forgotten dream, found in his private journal. After witnessing the heartbreaking truth of his demise, they were released. But instead of leaking a ghost story, they chose a different path. They built a digital monument, the Korea Project, unleashing his genius upon the world and giving his story a digital resurrection. In doing so, they proved that the most powerful way to exorcise a ghost born of forgetting is not to banish it, but to give it what it wants most, to be remembered.